everybody.
Hello.
Welcome to the podcast. What podcast is that, Joj?
This is the Micah podcast universe, and we're here to we exist to prove people wrong when they say
Sequels are never better than the originals. And this year we've had a fun year planned for everyone, and of course in between your Marvels and your DCs, your Marvels and an upcoming Insidious movie, and all these sweet new releases. We're covering new series that we haven't covered before. And you may have joined in because you're thinking, man, I got to hear about X-Men, and I don't remember the movie after X-Men Origins, and I didn't know it was Three Colors Blue.
Yeah, but this must be a very interesting, very artistic, strange run that some artsy-fartsy director was given the hands to direct. At a time before Marvel became too big and people still had chances.
But alas, we're not doing an X-Men movie. We're taking a breather before the X-Men train continues rolling down the tracks. And that breather is the Three Colors trilogy, a very, very famous trilogy of movies that I think pretty much if you have dabbled at all in film buffery, you have probably seen these movies at least like listed on lists.
Mm-hmm. Listed on lists. You heard it here first.
Listed on lists. And so for me, I've always wanted to watch these movies.
Me too.
And I have never watched them.
Me too.
So last night we sat down and we watched Blue. And right off the bat,
put on a blue screen on our TV and stared at it for an hour and a half.
That was what we did. And we were like, is that right? And then I looked it up on Letterboxd, found out it wasn't. So then we watched the movie Blue. So we spent 3 hours, but only an hour and a half was the actual movie.
Isn't this officially Three Colors Blue? Or at the time of its release, it was just called Blue? Because when you look it up now, it's Three Colors Blue, Three Colors White, Three Colors Red.
I think that is theatrical. Because for
blue?
one, like Three Colors Blue, Three Colors White, because it was planned that way. And I actually didn't look into that exact fact. You'll have to remind me because next episode I can check that.
Yeah.
But when we were watching it, like the title within the actual movie said Three Colors Blue.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, it's not like, I mean, we've covered Star Wars, folks. People can change things in movies after they're released. But I think that this was always from the inception of what this movie was going to be.
This series,
yeah. It was not like, it wasn't like the Before trilogy where they made one and then 9 years later?
9 years, I think, and then waited another 9 years.
Yeah, it was like...
There is a very funny reference to this series and Community that I didn't get for a very long time, but now being aware of these movies, it's very funny. Do you remember?
No, I have no clue.
It's from Britta, which makes a lot of sense based on her character. And she says something like, "It's like my favorite French trilogy, Bleu Blanc Rouge."
Oh, yeah.
And I think everyone rolls their eyes.
That's a good joke. Well, and that's something that I was. These are French movies, kind of. They're French. They're based on the colors of the French flag, blue, white, red. But this is by a Polish man who made these movies.
I noticed a lot of non-French names in the credits, not actor-wise.
Yeah.
Everyone knows what I'm trying to say.
The credits?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Just people who worked on this movie, I guess.
Oh, yes, the crew.
Not the cast.
The crew.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got confused as well. Yeah, so I didn't know that. The director of this movie is Krzysztof Kieslowski.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to tell you a little bit about him. He's pretty interesting. So he is a Polish man who he has since passed, but he was born in 1941. And he started out doing documentaries.
Okay.
And he was doing that for a little bit, and he was just trying to capture the everyday life of Polish people.
I bet those are some pretty dang interesting documentaries.
Sure. And you can see how, even though, that's much older, I think we're talking about the 70s when he was doing that, you can see how that extends into this work. capturing the everyday.
Yeah.
A lot of close-ups, a lot of static shots. So he stopped doing documentaries for two experiences that happened to him. He made this movie called Workers 71, where he showed workers talking about why they were striking, which was in 1970. But the Polish government was not a fan of that, so they censored his movie up the wazoo. And it was, I believe it was like years and years later that he was able to release it the way he intended to release it.
Wow.
So he didn't like that.
Okay.
Wasn't a fan of that, as makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And then he made this movie called Station, and I think it's actually a short, but it was nearly used as evidence in some trial. To which case, I did not see what that trial was, as I know that's probably your question.
Yeah. Some guy was questioned for murder, but Larry David saved his life too.
That's kind of what I was thinking of as well. But yeah, so then after those two experiences, he realized that he would have more artistic freedom making fiction, and he could actually be more truthful about life.
Yeah.
Creating fiction.
That's a very interesting perspective.
Yeah, he seems like a very interesting man, and there's another project that we're going to talk about that he worked on that we could probably cover on this podcast that would be wild. But I don't know maturity level. It could potentially be tough.
Okay.
We'll see though. So he moves into features, but he incorporates his documentary style. I think that's pretty obvious, even though you and I have only seen one of his movies. It's very apparent. And he became part of the Cinema of Moral Anxiety films. So that was a movement in Poland called the Cinema of Moral Anxiety films. And it had him and a few other directors. And I just grabbed it verbatim. So this movement portrayed the crisis of the regime in communist Poland, usually in the setting of a provincial town. The development of the movement was abruptly stopped by the introduction of the martial law in Poland in 1981. And when it was lifted, the country was overwhelmed with powerful political and social processes, which had eventually led to the fall of communism in the country and disappearance of the addressed social issues.
So this organization was to just talk about communism? Like that was their goal as directors?
No.
Did I miss that?
No. I think from how I presented it, it makes sense you took it there. This is like when it's like a movement in film that happened in Poland that they call that movement.
Yeah. But I
so
mean,
it's not
like,
an organization.
Well, I know. I guess what I mean is that what their subject matter is about? Is exposing communism?
Yeah, it's like whether intentional or not, that was what their films wound up being about.
Wow.
But it's in the same way that like you could put movies into camps like, oh, these are feminist movies. Like it's not like an organization.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, these movies help progress feminism.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So that's like what this is. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Already I'm like, man, this guy is very interesting. But he did these movies called the Decalogue. Have you ever heard of this?
That sounds familiar.
So they are 10 one-hour films, and they are each based on one of the 10 commandments.
Okay.
And this is why...
Wait. He had to get his tennis ball. Gilmore is like a moving tanker, like a moving ship. Because
once he begins...
if anything gets in his way, you can't prevent it from happening.
No, you can't. Yeah, so the Decalogue are 10 one-hour films about characters who are facing moral, ethical dilemmas as they live in this austere housing project in Poland. And each one is a 10 commandment, like loosely based on.
Whoa.
And because of
how's he spelled? How is it spelled?
Dekalog. And I want to let you know, listener, that I panicked and couldn't remember what D was called there for a second.
The TV miniseries.
Yeah,
technically.
It's kind of, it feels like it's one of those things that's people define it as both.
Okay.
So it's something potentially we could maybe cover on this podcast. But if you are doing a 10 Commandments, there is a thou shalt not lust, right? Isn't that a 10 commandment?
If we did this,
It could be real intense. Yeah.
well, lust is one of the 7 deadly sins.
Oh, maybe I'm getting that confused. Yeah.
But if we did this though, a Patreon episode would have to be the 10 Commandments.
Oh my gosh, you're very right. Let's see. What I'm trying to look up the 10 commandments.
You better
here.
edit this part out.
Why?
You shall not covet, you shall not murder, you shall not lie.
I thought there was a lust
You shall
one,
not
but
false idols.
10 commandments in order. Here we go. You shall have no other gods but me. You shall not make unto thee any graven images. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Honor your father and mother. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. That's what I was thinking of. And I just could potentially see you and I not being a fan of that movie.
Well,
that could be a tough watch.
So that actually, I would be interested in watching that.
Yeah.
In general, because based on how this movie blew, it's a very interesting message in this movie.
Yeah.
About a very horrific thing that happens.
Yeah.
So I would be interested in what he has to say about each of them, whether or not I would agree with them.
Right. Yeah, no, and I think it's like, so this movie blue, the blue color in the French flag stands for liberty. And so this movie is about liberty, but it's very loosely about liberty. That is certainly not at all the first word that came to mind if I was going to describe this movie. It'll be fun to discuss what we think that means when we get there, but so I would imagine that the 10 Commandments thing is probably a similar thing.
Yeah.
Where almost knowing the title actually informs how you view the material.
Yeah.
Which is cool when a title can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's just slapped on there. He also, he retires from films after Red, and he's done, but he did begin working on this other trilogy of movies, which would have been Heaven, Hell, and Purgatory.
Whoa.
But he did not complete them, and they've made 2 of them with 2 different directors in 2002 and 2005, but no one has made Purgatory. Oh, that's ironic.
I know, isn't that?
Oh, that just hit me. But I feel like someone needs to finish that.
Please, someone make it.
Yeah, so hey, maybe that could be a Halloween episode. The unfinished trilogy. But yeah, so he did those movies before he did the Decalogue before he did the 3 Colors movies.
Uh-huh.
Obviously, they're the last 3 movies he makes. And according to Stanley Kubrick, they're the only masterpiece he can think of.
Whoa, huh?
Yeah. Now, I could not find this quote outside of people saying Stanley Kubrick said this.
Okay.
And he is such a legendary figure that I often take things about him with a grain of salt. So I don't know if that's a real thing he said, but I do know that I can confirm that he, without a doubt, thought they were incredibly, insanely good works of art.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, so I have more, but do you want to hit any actors or anything like that?
Some. So Juliette Binoche or something plays our main character. She is also in The English Patient. Is she the English Patient?
No.
That's Ralph Fiennes, right?
Well, yeah, it's Ralph Fiennes, and then the lead is also not her. The lead woman. I can't remember
Kristen
who she
Scott
is.
Thomas.
Yeah, and she's in plenty. You've seen Kristen and stuff.
She's also in Clouds of Sils Maria, Chocolat, Ghost in the Shell, the live action.
Whoa.
Winter Boy, Paradise Highway, Staircase, the HBO.
Oh wow!
Show.
Okay.
And just so much more. She's in a crap ton.
Yeah, French actress. I'm sure if we were French, we would be a lot more familiar with.
She's in a lot of American movies.
But I mean, there's probably a bunch of classic French things that we haven't seen
probably.
that she stars in. I would imagine.
But Micah, she's big.
Yeah.
Um, Charlotte Very plays Lucille, the Lady of the Night character.
Okay.
She is also in A Tale of Winter, Mrs. Hyde. A movie I cannot pronounce the title of. A couple of them, or Les Prestige de la Mort, and a lot of other French things. And then Helene Vincent plays the journalist.
Okay.
She is also in The Count of Monte Cristo, but not that one we're thinking of, a French one.
Yeah, that makes sense that they would have a French one.
And then a lot of French movies.
Yeah. Now, can I ask you something? As you're looking at these, are the titles in French?
Some of them are.
Okay.
But some of them I can't read the whole English title without clicking on it, and then it gives me the French title.
Okay. That's a funny thing about IMDb. They've made it so that a lot of the titles are now native to the language, which I think they're doing that to respect it, and I get that. But as someone who doesn't speak, say, Korean, it really makes it hard to find stuff now. So that movie starring Choi Sik-min, is that his name?
Yeah.
Where he's the teacher?
Yeah. Oh, is it only you can't? The title is in Korean,
it used to not be, and now it is, and I can
Is it like the violin player or something?
No, it's something even simpler than that.
Yeah.
But now when I look it up, I'm like, I don't know how to look for this movie anymore.
And we'll never watch it. It's crazy, guys. We big fans of Kang Ho Song, and we love watching. We've sought out movies with him just in it.
Yeah,
and there's even a movie with him and Choi Min-sik in it, and it's such a funny Coen Brothers-esque movie. Don't remember what it's called. Look it up.
Oh, was that the one with the where they're all at the house?
They're all at the house.
Oh yeah, that was a good movie. What was that movie called?
I don't know.
I'll see if I can find it.
But we once happened upon this movie that Kang Ho Song was in called Taxi Driver, right?
Yep,
Taxi Driver. Not the one you're thinking of. And it was just a wonderful movie. We watched it solely because he was in it, and we ended up learning a lot about Korean history, and it was just such a good story. And then around the same time, we found a poster that was somewhat, because the poster of Taxi Driver is Kang Ho Song just leaning out of the taxi window, smiling up at at a bright blue sky, and it just looks like so hopeful. And then around the same time, we found a poster of Min-sik Choi. And he's composing, but there's like behind him. So he's like a music teacher. And he also, it's like very goldly lit, and he's just smiling. And
we've only seen him in roles where he's like very intense.
Creepy.
And creepy, or like action hero.
That one that he's in with Kang Ho Song is like the most not creepy I've seen him.
Yeah, and that movie is called The Quiet Family.
Okay.
And there's a lot of people listening to this podcast that would really like that movie.
Yeah.
Kind of a dark comedy.
Oh, it's so good.
Like, oh, we accidentally murdered someone kind of thing, or did we?
It's such a Coen Brothers plot.
Yeah, it's real good.
But anyway, we can't find that Min-sik Choi one, and it feels so incomplete, even though those movies have nothing to do with each other.
Yeah.
We're just big fans of both those dudes.
Although, you know what? I should just look for it on Letterboxd, because they just put the title of the native language below the title, so you can actually find what you're looking for. So I'm looking right now, but you keep talking.
So also in this movie is Benoit Regent, who plays Oliver, our leading guy. That's not Olivier. That's the character's name. Oh yeah, you're right. The character's name is Olivier, but he is also in Dangerous Moves. He's in the Color Red, Mayday.
Wait, not
Three Colors Red.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, shocking, but not all French movies and shows.
Yeah. Okay. I am wondering if this. Oh, here it is. The movie's called Springtime.
Okay.
But yeah, every time first of all, that's a hard thing to look up.
Yeah.
Springtime when you're trying to find it. And then number two, again, on IMDb, I don't think you can look up Springtime anymore. You have to go through his filmography and find it. And it has the South Korean letters, which I don't have a remote clue how to translate. So I don't like when they do that. I think they should keep them in there. I think they should make it so that you can search by, if I search something in French, I can find it in French. If I search something in English, I should still be able to find it.
Yeah.
So, dumb side tangent.
Mm-hmm.
But something I think the people required of us. Would you not agree?
Well, yeah, you gotta get the word out about that one movie I already forgot the title of.
Springtime.
No, the other one.
A Quiet Family.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and I don't think they were very quiet, if you know what I'm saying. Yeah, very good. Maybe it's still on Amazon. I think that's where we watched it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about a little bit about this movie. Roger Ebert calls this an anti-tragedy. And he calls the next one an anti-comedy, and then the other one an anti-something else, which we'll get to when we get there. So I like that reading on the movie because it sounds like, for those who have mistakenly chosen to not watch the movie, I'm teasing you, but it is very good.
No, it's a mistake. It's great.
It is about a woman who loses her famous husband composer and her daughter in a car accident. And then it's her coping with that.
Mm-hmm.
So when you hear that, you're like, oh, man, this is going to be really heavy.
What a dour movie. And it is pretty dang depressing.
But
it is, I think I would agree with anti-tragedy because it is, like, very optimistic.
Yeah. And especially reading about, how do you pronounce his name again? Kieslowski. Kieslowski. That's how you pronounce it, I believe. Reading about him, I'm like, it's kind of surprising that this movie is so hopeful.
Yeah.
Because it seems like that's a pretty interesting and tough life to live.
Yeah.
And he seems attracted to really big human themes that typically I feel like, especially European audiences, don't necessarily go for hope in those things, or European creators a lot of times. But anyway, so this movie is The Liberty of the Flag, and this I did not catch. But there's a symbol seen throughout the film in the TV of people falling. I saw that. But they're either doing skydiving or bungee jumping, and the director is careful to show falls with no cords at the beginning of the film. But as the story develops, the cords become more and more important. Apparent as a symbol of a link to the past.
Wow.
And I actually view that not as much a symbol of a link to the past, but more as you are recovering from grief. You're not just free falling anymore. There's like a recovery happening. That's kind of what I thought when I read that.
Yeah.
Now you have a cord, like you're going to get pulled back up.
Yeah.
And you're going to be okay, maybe.
Or you'll always get pulled back to the past.
Oh, well, yeah, that works too.
But she is throughout the movie.
Yeah. So it's written by the director, Christoph, and then it's also written by Christoph Piesowicz, who was a member of the Polish Senate and a lawyer, and he started collaborating with this director because Christoph wanted to document trials for a documentary, and it led to them working on a movie called No End. And then he worked on Decalogue, and they became
that's random
kind of partners in a way. The cinematography, I was shocked to find out, is someone we have covered before.
Is it the Andre guy?
No.
Oh.
His name is Sławomir Ejak, and I believe he's also Polish, I think. He's definitely European, but he did Black Hawk Down, and he did a movie we've covered on this podcast years ago called Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, which is one of the better-looking movies, too.
They all look good.
Oh, yes. I guess
but
that's...
I know what you're saying.
That's when they totally changed the style of how it looks.
Well, the tone really changes by movie 5, Micah, because Voldemort's back,
yes.
Umbridge is at the school, and Harry's going through a lot of anger issues.
Yes, that's true.
I think that's when David Yates comes in, too.
Yeah, it's when the series changes to the dark angst. And then the music is by Zbigniew Preisner, who did the music for The Decalogue and White and Red, which we'll talk about in the coming weeks.
Is he the person that wrote the original, the music that we hear in the movie? If you didn't watch the movie, that sounded like a really dumb question from me. But remember, earlier we said that the main character's husband is a famous composer. So egg on your face for not watching the movie.
Yeah. No, yeah, and you got to be pretty talented to make something that's like.
Oh, I don't like whenever you watch a movie and someone's an artist, whether it's painting or music or something, and we're actually seeing the painting, we're actually hearing the music that they're creating in it.
Yeah. A
It's
fictional
so
movie.
fictional, and it's supposed like everyone's saying you're the best, you're so good. It is so hard to actually make it feel like it's true.
Absolutely. And this movie does it because the composer was working on this piece that was called the United, like the unification of Europe, I think is what the piece was called.
Yeah.
And he never finished it. And so throughout the movie, there's an attempt to finish it, which we'll talk about. But it sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
And it sounds very intense. And it sounds, for me as a musician, it sounded like, oh, this is too complicated for me to have written or something like that, which I think is pretty key.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, sometimes you watch something, especially when you get into music, where it is like, you know, like there was the movie A Ghost Story, and there we watched some of it, didn't finish it because it was really boring.
Oh, was someone a musician in that?
And yeah, Casey Affleck was, and he just wrote this song, and to me, it didn't hit anything for me. And I know Josiah is listening, and I know he'll disagree with me because I remember he had that song on his iPod. So maybe there's a discussion there. But I feel like this is pretty indisputable. Like, oh, this sounds like an epic orchestral thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes movies can't pull that off.
And in the movie, they're trying to figure out what the chorus is supposed to sing at a certain point in it. Because their husband dies, and our main character, Julie and Olivier, are trying to finish it. And they knew that he intended to put a chorus in it, and they couldn't figure out what he wanted.
Yeah.
And they figured out that he wanted the chorus to sing 1 Corinthians 13.
That's where it was?
They for sure sing this part in the movie.
Okay.
This is the 1 Corinthians 13:1. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. So it's just about if I don't have love, I have nothing.
I thought you were going to read the whole passage.
No, I think that's kind of all that was shown in the movie, like that we heard.
Oh no, they do like the whole passage. Wait, keep reading.
That's a long passage. So also, and if I have a prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains but not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burned but have not love, I gain nothing. And then it goes into love is patient, love is kind.
Yeah, all of that was in there. Even the love is patient.
Oh, I don't remember that part.
Yeah, I did the whole thing. That was like the montage at the end of the movie. Yeah.
I think I was just swept away.
Yeah. So yeah, the movie. Oh, I do want to point out. Fun note: a movie that pulls this off in a way that very few movies have pulled it off is Dewey Cox Walk Hard, or Walk Hard: The Dewey Cox Story, because they write music that is like as good as Johnny Cash, and it's like you could listen to that music even though it's joke music.
What do you think about Popstar? Never Stop Popping.
I think Popstar does it too.
Yeah. Well, I think what helps is it's a lonely island.
Yeah. No. Yeah. It's funny that sometimes comic stuff can actually do a better job at representing music.
Yeah.
Or because they know what they're spoofing. So they
That's just reminding me of a fun YouTube video for people to look up. Just gives you a little giggle through the day, and it's Dave Grohl showing Jack Black? Kyle Gass how to write a pop song.
Yeah.
It's very funny.
It is very funny.
And it's very true.
It is. So this movie comes out in France, September 8th, 1993. But then it comes out in Poland, Warsaw, October 10th, 1993. And couldn't find a budget, but in the U.S. it made $1.3 million, and worldwide it made $1.38 million. So it made like $500,000 in the U.S. Because it was like 1.33 in domestic. Anyway, so that's all the notes I have. Do you have any more actors, or are you good? So the movie begins. And already one shot in, and I was like, okay, my jam. It's like a shot I've never seen in a movie before, where a car. It's like
they put the camera underneath the car, and it's focused on the wheel, and they're on a highway.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and then, it says 3 colors blue.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because this movie, I mean, I did write out the plot pretty well, and I think we can go beat by beat. But as far as this movie being about liberty, what do you like read that as? How do you view that?
And with the lens of liberty.
Yeah, because
So,
that's the color representation.
Something I read, because I don't often go on the trivia anymore for movies, but if they're really interesting like these ones, sometimes it's fun.
Yeah.
And one thing I did see was the idea of it being freedom. It's like, how can this movie be about freedom when she loses her husband and daughter in a car accident?
Right.
But the idea is she does gain freedom from a marriage and motherhood. That being said, I think she was in a happy marriage. We find out that he was cheating on her, but she didn't know that. I think she just thought it was a happy marriage. And then there's like no mention of any strain with her like 5-year-old daughter. So both happy things for her.
Yeah.
That are taken from her. But I think that the filmmaker is trying to posit that she is free from those things now. I don't think the director is saying that marriage and motherhood was bogging her down or like limiting her.
No.
It's just, I think it's taking this tragedy and trying to look at it optimistically moving forward.
Yeah.
But it sounds weird and like bad. And like throughout the movie, she is doing everything she can to forget.
Yeah.
Her daughter and her husband. And is basically like, it wants nothing to do with it anymore. But throughout the movie, she is pulled back, whether by people in her life who were there while she was married and had a kid, or she'll hear the music that her husband composed or she composed. So I also read this other thing that was super interesting. There are at least 3 times in this movie when the music gets really loud and the screen fades to black.
Oh, I feel like that happened like 5 times.
Okay, so maybe 5 times. And then it fades back and we're in the same moment, same scene. And I think what I read...
Okay, let's talk about what we think, though, first.
Okay.
Because I had a thought about that, and I want to sound smarter than whoever wrote that.
Yeah. Okay.
I felt like so what I kind of read that is that feeling that grief has over people, where you can be having a conversation with someone or swimming in a pool or whatever, and then for no reason at all or because of something they said, you're completely ripped out of the moment and you're like plunged back into the feeling of grief, and then you have to go on and live through that moment again.
That's how I took it too.
Yeah.
Same way.
What'd you read, though?
What I read, though, was that in filmmaking, fade outs like that, fade to blacks like that, and then you usually fade into a next scene, it marks a passage of time.
Yeah.
But in this, like quite literally, there's no passage of time. But to her, in her deep depression and grief, it's as if time is not a thing. Time doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So it's as if like that is passage of time to her.
Right.
Something like, I think it is similar to what we're saying. Something triggers her, reminds her of what she's trying to forget. And it's like she blacks out for what maybe feels like a lifetime. And then she like comes back to and nothing's changed. She's still living her life.
Yeah. And it's details like that I think this is why this movie is so popular and why it sticks with people.
Yeah.
I think that's like the takeaway to me is like if I was gonna tell someone you should watch this movie, I'd be like, well, and they were like, I don't want to watch this movie. It sounds bad. I would be like, they do this like filmmaking thing that's really impactful that doesn't like make sense to you as the viewer. And it's like in a really intentional good way.
Yeah. And I was hoping that the color blue would be used a lot, obviously.
And boy, was it.
It was. And of course, like with the premise of this movie, it's like, okay, this makes sense that this one's blue because this really tragic thing happened and she's going to be depressed the whole time, which she pretty much is.
Yeah.
And I think that blue often showed up. It would be like reflected on her face. It would be like the overall color of the scene.
Yeah.
Everything. It's always when she remembered something.
Right.
So you have that fade out thing that happens too, but then you also have the color blue more prominently showed up when she was recalling her past.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Specifically when she was playing music. And then literally when she had her daughter's light fixture. That she kept. That's the one thing she kept.
Right.
Was that.
So I was just trying to look up if there was like a making of documentary. Of course there wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the first things that popped up was Roger Ebert on his show reviewing the movie. And so I was like, oh, this would be fun to watch. And so I watched it, and the way he read the music fading to black, playing the music, sometimes showing the score and then fading back in. He read that as like she was trying so hard to destroy that thing, but it kept pulling her back in.
I think that's true.
And I think that it was just interesting. And I that's what I dig about this movie is like, I don't think Ebert is wrong and I don't think I'm wrong, but I don't think the two things that we're saying necessarily complement each other. And that's kind of the beauty of this movie is you, the listener, might watch it and you might kind of have a different reading on that. Because this movie asks a lot of questions, even just plot-wise. There's some things like, did she write her husband's music? It's unanswered. We don't know a definite. It's not like a shocking moment. Even like the mistress stuff is still, that's pretty clear, but like the way she deals with it is very quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another thing that it escapes me at the moment, but what's interesting, this is a perfect example of like American movies versus European movies.
Yeah.
And this was also a conversation I wanted to have. You told me, just shut up last night, save it for the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that a lot of European movies, particularly the French movies that I've seen, seem to have plots that are like if you just read the plot, you're like, okay, woman's composer, husband, and child die in a car accident, and she attempts to live life again, finishing a piece of music. That sounds, in my like American brain, that sounds very like that sounds.
Just say it. It sounds boring.
No. It doesn't. No. It doesn't sound boring. It's like I can see what that movie is, and it is slower, but it's still like there's a lot of plot, and there's going to be a very specific ending, and yada yada yada. And I think that European movies are like oftentimes about an extraordinary event, but the mundanity and the ordinariness of living through that event and what goes on around it.
Mm-hmm.
Because another movie I thought of, which is an extremely influential movie called Blow Up. That movie is like, there's this photographer and he took a picture, and in the picture there might be someone who was killing someone else and he's not sure. I mean, doesn't that sound like, okay, we got like a David Fincher movie on our hands? But most of the movie is him like sleeping with women, taking pictures, like buying stuff. And then occasionally he's like trying to figure out whether or not this thing happened. And I feel like,
well, then say the American version.
And then
because it's an interesting comparison.
Yes, thank you. Brian De Palma made a version, like kind of a version hearkening to that movie, where he's kind of paying homage to it, called Blow Up.
Blow Out. One of them's called Blow Out. One of them's called Blow Up.
I'm sorry. Blow Up is the French movie. Blow Out is the Brian De Palma movie. And in that movie, John Travolta is like a sound engineer, and he sees this car accident happen, but he hears in his recording that like the tire blew out and he thinks it was shot. And that movie is like an action thriller, like all the way through. Also, both of these movies rock. Like very worth
watching.
watching.
You watch Blow Up?
I watched it.
Why was I not included? Unbelievable.
I think I just didn't watch it with you.
No, I'm just kidding. But I don't remember you watching that movie.
Yeah, I watched it.
And I keep a letterbox on you while you're keeping one on yourself.
But yeah, so it's like the difference where one's like tantalizing and exciting, and the other one's like, if you did potentially witness a murder, you would probably like live a normal life for the most part.
Did that guy even go to the police?
I think there was a scene where he does attempt to go to the
but what
police.
you're saying is the Brian De Palma movie is what the movie's about. Like
Yeah,
that is
yeah.
like what John Travolta is doing in that movie is he is investigating, trying to prove and is kind of uncovering a conspiracy about a political thing.
Yeah.
In contrast to the other one, that is nothing like that.
Yeah, it's like that. Like I had read that the plot was, this murder thing, and when I finished the movie, I was like, I don't think that's the right way you should frame this movie because it sets you up to think it's going to be this action-packed movie, and it's not.
Yeah.
That's a byproduct of what he is doing in the movie.
Yeah.
It's not the whole, and there's not even resolution to that in the movie.
Yeah.
And I think that, I said it so much better last night. Maybe we should have recorded last night after the movie. But I feel like in our experiences traveling abroad, we're not experts, folks. We are not experts. But it feels like in Europe, there is just definitely more of a, hey, we're going to chill out vibe. We're going to go out to dinner and we're going to be there for 2-3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get a bottle of wine. We're going to chill out.
We're going to ask, why are we here? Like existential things. I feel like that's not that there aren't American movies that ask the same question, but at the end of the day, they're still story driven.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't watched, I've mostly watched American movies because I'm American.
Well, it's why, like, if you watch the movie Tar, which is one of my favorites of last year, you would. I know there's plenty of American filmmakers that are doing this, but like if you didn't know who directed it, if you had to guess, you would probably be like, I don't know, probably a European, because it's like a slower moving movie.
Did a European direct it?
No, it's an American. Guy who was in The Piano Player and Eyes Wide Shut is the director.
Oh, right.
But all this to say, it's like in Europe, there's maybe less of a, like in America, we live in a capitalist society. You have to achieve stuff. You always have to be working. You got to go. You got to go. You got to go. And in Europe, you're encouraged to chill out. So the fact that movies are, and this one in particular, it's like it's interested in the little moments. It's not going to like spend a half hour building up this intense crash at the beginning of the movie. This like action set piece. We don't see the crash. We hear the crash, and then we see the remnants of it.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's actually kind of crazy how they did the crash in this movie.
It is. It's impressive.
Yeah.
But it's like this movie's concerned about like setting up a shot where you see the doctor talking to her in her eye.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally about these tiny, tiny details.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a huge difference between European and American cinema.
Yeah.
And it's why it's taken me a long time to even get into European cinema. And now I feel like I'm old enough that I actually kind of get it. And it's less like, oh, every movie has to be...
You sound like you said every booby.
Every movie has to be like Inception, where it's always crazy.
Mm-hmm.
They don't.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Yeah.
You want to... anything to add to that?
Well, it's just making me think of... We watched White Noise recently. Big recommend. That movie was so cool. But when we're like the first 15 minutes into the movie, I was enjoying it a lot.
Yeah.
I could not understand a single word someone was saying. I know that's the point. It's all white noise. But part of me was just like, part of me at a point was like, I just need to know, because I felt like I remember this was based on a book. I just need to know that it is.
Yeah.
And so I looked it up and saw that it was not only based on a book, but it's postmodern.
Yeah.
So when I like read that and it like unlocked it for me, it was like, it's like I started understanding what people were saying.
Yeah.
I just needed the context for that. And so, because that movie's like, if we're talking about American cinema, pretty unconventional.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It probably, if I read the book, because most postmodernist books are like this, it's unfilmable. Right. And it was awesome.
Yeah.
But I hope that makes sense kind of in relation to this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And I just think that there's something so exciting to me as someone who enjoys art that, like, I often think about the first time I watched a Hayao Miyazaki movie, which was Spirited Away. And when I was watching the movie, it was so outside of the realm of what I was used to plots doing. And then I followed it up with My Neighbor Totoro, which
is even more kind of stream of consciousness in a way.
Yeah.
Meandering slice of life.
Yeah, and well, actually, I watched Howls in between. But anyway, all that to say, I like those movies transported me into this other world where it was like, oh, I almost feel like I'm missing something because this is so different from an American movie
Mm-hmm.
that it's confusing. But I'm like, I don't know why, but I love it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like when we started watching Indian movies this last spring and summer, it was a similar vibe where it's like, oh, they have like a whole different way of doing this that as an American audience member, I think I have to like put that aside and kind of go in fresh and
Mm-hmm.
recognize that maybe I'm going to miss just the subtlety of this is how these movies are.
Yeah.
Whereas, you go into an American movie and you expect it a certain way.
Pretty much.
And I just think that's what's exciting about art.
Mm-hmm.
And, watching a movie like this movie, Blue, to me, I don't know. Do you feel this way? Like, I feel like movies like this are always like, I got a cup of fresh water.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you
Totally.
feel that way.
Especially after watching some X-Men movies.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Another thing I think we try to stress on this podcast is it's cool and fine to like comic book movies and action movies and stuff. We love a lot of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But there is something like so refreshing about, okay, we watched 4 X-Men movies, and now we're watching a movie about a woman struggling with grief.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? I'm excited to jump back into X-Men, but it's like,
Yeah.
it's so nice. Variety is just wonderful.
Yeah.
And just the general trappings of different people making stuff is exciting.
It is.
But this movie.
Yeah. So she's the only one who survives the car accident. Husband and daughter die.
Yeah.
She wakes up in the hospital and hears this news and is in the hospital recovering for a while. So this is kind of a movie, too, where I would say there's just not much dialogue.
No.
It is a lot of just looking, feeling. That's kind of it. Watching her walk around a room and what she's doing. It's not boring, though.
No.
Boy, oh boy. But it was... So she is in the hospital and she breaks a window.
Yeah.
I think, one, to distract the nurse, but also out of anger because of what's happened. And then she goes to the medicine cabinet, grabs a bottle of pills, and tries killing herself, but she can't do it.
Yeah.
And then she's continued to recover in the hospital.
That's a wonderful moment because the nurse finds her and she's just looking at her as she's spitting up the pills and she's like, I can't do it.
And she's like, I broke the window. I'm sorry. And the nurse is like, it doesn't matter. And they just linger on it for so long.
And again, that illustrates like this could potentially be an epic moment, an exciting moment, and it's really treated like, isn't this sad? And even the nurse is like, it's okay, let's just get you back.
Yeah,
it's gonna be fine. It's very quiet. This is a very quiet movie.
So while she's recovering, she misses the funeral, but she's able to like watch it on a tiny little thing. Tiny little portable TV thing I've never seen before. Panasonic though.
Yes.
And yeah, she's watching the funeral of her daughter and husband. I thought it was interesting that while the first person that gets up to speak and is starting to give a eulogy, he's only talking about the husband because they establish he's like he was the world's best living composer of the time.
Yeah.
So to lose him is like a crazy tragedy.
Yeah.
And then she starts crying. She moves the little portable TV away and she loses what is it called? Reception.
Yeah.
And it goes blank. And we never hear anything about the daughter.
That's interesting. I didn't even pick up on that.
I think story-wise there is more to explore with the husband. Obviously, the daughter was only 5, and to lose a child is tragic. Period.
Yeah,
that's it. And I think it's explored in ways that aren't spoken throughout the movie, but are shown like through the light fixture and stuff.
Right.
But yeah.
The daughter is not. There's not like a big mother moment in this movie. No. I mean, there's really not like the Oscar scene or whatever. Sure. Where she's throwing stuff and she's like, I just miss my husband.
No, it's very quiet.
Yeah.
She's visited by a journalist while in the hospital.
Yes.
And the journalist was very rude. Just like asking her
Oh,
questions about her husband. And it's kind of like, I'm not here to interview you, but she's still asking her questions.
And okay. So before we move past this scene, this had one of my favorite shots in the whole movie, where it's like before the woman asks her a question, the camera dollies in on her, and she's just bathed in this artificial blue light.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to black. I think it's like the first
It's the
time it
first
does
time.
that.
Yeah.
And then it comes back, and then the music played again, just a little portion of it, and then it dollies out, and it's like these are those beautiful moments where, realism in film. I like what Christoph said earlier in his career, where he was like, I felt like I could tell stuff more honestly and show real life more honestly by making fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like a moment like that where you bathe someone in blue light and you dolly in, she has this memory hit her, dolly out. It's so artificial, but
not even just a memory, but a person is entering her bubble
yeah,
to ask her questions about her past. And
Yeah.
that's why we have the blue. That's why we have that fade to black.
and it expresses something that just a static camera and a real person in grief doesn't get across.
Mm-hmm.
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she asks her, "Is it true you wrote your husband's music?"
Yeah.
Which again, I'm trained to think like, okay, that'll be a big conversation slash, like big reveal.
Well,
at
I'm
one
already
point in the
assuming
movie.
that she's always resented her husband, and she's like not really grieving her husband. She's grieving her daughter
Mhm.
because her husband stole the limelight. We find out soon that he has had a mistress, so just assuming that he's been a bad guy. But they
Yeah.
never do that. They never do that.
Yeah.
By all accounts, he was well being an adulterer, but by all accounts, he seems like he was a fine husband and father. There's like no
Yeah.
she never really has a bad word to say about him.
Yeah.
But so she goes home and they live in like a freaking castle.
Oh yeah.
It's crazy. But she goes back home, and while she's kind of going through the house, it's cutting to this other man in this other room, and I thought he was in the house, but he was in a conservatory.
Yeah.
Her husband's conservatory, and he was cleaning out his desk, and he had this folder of all of these music notes as well as pictures, and that's when we see the husband with a woman that's not Julie.
Yeah.
So that's when we find out that he had been cheating on her.
But and again, it's just great. This movie's really good. When I first saw that, I was like, okay, I'm trained to think that he's cheating on his wife. But then at the same time, I was like, but this movie is so subtle and whatever that I thought, I don't know how old these pictures are.
Mm-hmm.
And
I thought they were pretty recent, but yeah.
Well, but what I mean to say is like I was like, I don't know if that's what the movie's trying to tell us right now. I don't know that information, and I don't know if this is important yet. Of course it is, and then they tell us later and they clear it up, which I was thankful that they made it very apparent. And maybe I'm giving the movie credit for something it didn't even try to do.
Yeah.
But I just felt like that was interesting.
Yeah.
Now I feel stupid.
It's okay. But she goes through the house, goes to her daughter's room. Well, she asks someone, "Did you guys clear out the blue room, everything in it?" And they said yes. She goes into the blue room, and there's this light fixture in there that she kind of breaks a little bit.
Yeah.
Like physically breaks it, and I mean, it was her daughter's room, presumably. And it's almost like they removed everything but the light fixture.
Yeah.
And
was there anything that referenced the daughter for that room?
Well, there was drawings on the wall.
There were, okay.
And stuff. So either was the daughter's bedroom or playroom.
Okay.
So she wanted it all removed because she didn't want to come home to her daughter's room.
Yeah.
That would not have her daughter in it.
Yeah.
So I think that's why she gets angry that the chandelier or the light fixture's still there and like rips it a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's because it's reminding her of her grief. And then shortly after, she finds their housekeeper in the pantry crying, like sobbing. And she's asking her, like, "What's wrong? Why are you crying? Why are you crying?" And the housekeeper says, "Because you're not." And they had just such a sweet moment together.
Yeah. It's really wonderful.
Yeah.
So then she tries to sell. She's like having them sell everything, and she's gonna purge it and leave.
Mm-hmm.
So she's having that intense response of like, this part of my life is over. I guess this would be another example like of liberty, where it's like, I'm free from all this.
But she does say later in the movie, I forget who she's talking to, but she's like, I am done with marriage. I am done with family. I am done with any responsibility because they're all traps. Because
Oh,
people
yeah.
die and they leave you.
Yeah.
So she's having a very aggressive response to grief
Uh-huh.
that could be seen as unhealthy.
Oh, yeah.
But
You think?
but it is like she is taking advantage of it's like she's taking advantage of this newfound freedom in a way that might be unhealthy, but by the end of the movie,
Yeah.
she's like accepting the freedom fully, I think is it.
Yeah. It's just so interesting. I just didn't think of the movie with liberated as the key word to it.
Yeah, well, I think, liberation, freedom, liberty, they're very positive words. They're
They
looked
don't
on.
always mean, they don't
But
inherently mean that.
No. She
You
didn't
know.
want to be freed from that.
Yeah. That's so interesting. But yeah, there's this wonderful shot where she is looking at a piano, and you're hearing the score, and you're watching it go along, and then she yanks out the wood in the piano and slams the lid.
Yeah.
And I, that's the moment where she's like, okay, the music is going away. And she goes to, is it the conservatory? Is that the same place where
I don't
the
know,
music
but a lady
stored?
who has all these sheets of music, like she stores them.
Yeah, and she pulls out the sheet of music that he'd been working on. It's the unification of Europe.
At this point, I had assumed that this was hers, just because we had been told. Like someone asked the question,
Yeah.
"Did you write all the music?" So at this point, I was just curious, like, is this really hers or not?
Yeah, I think it's her husband's.
I think that this is what I think.
Okay.
I think that they collaborated.
Yeah.
I think it was at least equal, or she did more.
Okay.
But he was the ultimate composer.
Yeah.
And got all the recognition for it. And because, we'll get to the end of the movie. Because I think it's because of the question that's posed later.
From Olivier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah. Okay.
But she takes the sheet music that
and the woman who gives it to her like says, okay, there's like a lot of corrections, but she goes, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
This is beautiful. So everyone's setting this up as like, this is like the real thing. He was gonna make it. They make it feel like he was working on his magnum opus.
Yes.
Or they were. However that relationship breaks
Yeah.
down. This was gonna be like the thing that would change the world.
Yeah.
And then she takes it.
She takes it, and it's the only copy that she knows of.
Wink, wink.
But the only copy.
Yeah.
And she goes to a dump truck and throws it in, and destroys it.
And we see it getting destroyed.
We see it getting destroyed.
And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
That's where she's going.
And then does this happen after? Well, okay, so she gets an apartment, whatever.
Not yet.
Okay, so what happens next is she calls Olivier.
Yeah.
Okay, so she's at the home, the now empty home. The only thing that's left there is a mattress.
Yeah.
And she's emptying her purse, and she finds a lollipop, a blue lollipop, and it kind of sends her spiraling because it was for her daughter.
Oh, duh.
And she.
You picked up all the daughter stuff that I didn't.
You gotta notice anything that's the color blue, and then the next movie, anything that's the color white,
Yeah.
anything that's red. But she unwraps the lollipop and eats her grief.
Yeah.
She eats it.
Yeah.
Because I think she's just continuing to stuff it down.
Yeah.
And then she calls Olivier, and this is how like brief and gruff the dialogue is, where the first thing she says is, "Do you love me?"
Yeah.
And he says yes. And she said, well, he says we. And and she says,
yeah, we've been to France.
She says, "For how long have you loved me?" And I think he's like, "Ever since I started working with Patrice, the husband."
Yeah.
And then she's like, "Okay, come over."
Yeah. And it felt, because sometimes this kind of thing in movies just doesn't, like, oh, your husband just died and you're going to sleep with this other man. It just doesn't work for me a lot of times.
Yeah.
But there was something about the way this movie is set up and written and framed and the shots and stuff where I was like, yeah, I buy it. This makes sense to me.
Well, it's just it is just so jarring, all of it.
Yeah.
So it's just this happens and it's like I don't think she should have done that. That seems pretty like I don't think she's in the right frame of mind. Like,
Yeah.
it feels like she's taking advantage of a person.
Yeah.
If
And
that makes
it
sense.
kind of actually, what's funny you saying that is it almost feels like he's taking advantage of her.
Well, you could also see it that way too, for sure.
Because she's in such a emotional state. It's like, should you really be like, okay, cool, yeah, I do love you, let's have sex. Like that seems really weird to me.
Yeah.
But it also feels like they have, maybe a history or there's a relationship there.
I don't think that they were doing anything prior.
I don't think it was
anything,
a sexual relationship, but I mean they
familiarity.
Yeah.
She knew. She had a feeling.
But again, see, this is what's beautiful about this movie is it doesn't answer all these questions. And I, if you watch this movie, I'd be curious to hear what you thought about some of the things we're discussing, or if you disagreed with us or whatever, because I think a lot of people could get a lot of different things out of this. But then she gets an apartment in Paris. We knew that because later they said we got to go to Montparnasse. And folks, we've been there. And I was like, cool, this is
the
in
middle
Paris.
finger of Paris.
Yeah. Would you want to explain that?
That's not where she lives. Oh, Montparnasse
cool.
is like the one skyscraper in Paris, and it's the only way that basically the city of Paris allowed people to build it is if it was outside of downtown. So it's like way outside of downtown. And well, we went to it. You can go to the top, and there's like you get a glorious view of the night sky, just crazy, and the Eiffel Tower and everything. But they were saying that like Paris does not want to be a skyscraper city.
Yeah.
But this one place is like, well, we want to build this skyscraper, and they're like, hey, you build it all the way over there, away from all of us.
Yeah.
And that's why they call it the middle finger of Paris.
Yeah.
Because it's just this lone skyscraper.
And Parisians do not like it.
No.
Even
it
today.
is an eyesore.
It is.
Compared to the rest of what's going on down there.
No, it's like I'm overjoyed that we were able to go, and I thought it was really, really cool, and it was super fun. And I think it was one of my mom's favorite things we did on the trip, just seeing all of Paris. But it is like when
they were playing like Taylor Swift and Black Eyed Peas, they were just like blaring it up there, and you could buy like $9 glasses of wine and stuff.
But it is kind of funny because it's like, oh yeah, but if you live in that city, that sucks.
Yeah,
because it is this big historical city. Like everywhere you look, there's history, and then there's this like a capitalist dude is like, let's make some money and build a skyscraper. It feels very real estate-y in a bad way.
Yeah.
But so she gets an apartment, and then we have this kind of strange scene where she looks out of her window and she sees this man getting beat up by 3 other men. And then the man runs into her apartment building
and locks her out of it. And while she's locked out for the night,
well, she locked herself out.
Oh, she did.
Yeah, he didn't get in her room.
You're saying he ran into the apartment building, not her.
Ran into the apartment building. He's like knocking, and it's like this man clearly needs help, but she's like alone. What is she gonna do? And maybe that's part of why this scene is in there, is just showing like, here's your newfound freedom. You like don't have security.
Yeah.
And then she goes out of her apartment and looks in the hallway, and she goes, is anyone there? After things have kind of calmed down, and then she says it again, and then her door shuts behind her and she's locked out. And she spends the night on the stairwell.
And she witnesses a floor down that she sees the lady of the night there, and the man right next door.
Lady of the night.
I don't know, it's fun. And then the man next door comes into her apartment.
Yeah. And then the next day she's visited by a neighbor who's like, we need you to sign this thing.
It's the wife of that man. She says,
oh, yeah. I did not catch that.
Yeah, she says, we don't want whores in here. And Julie...
loose women, and she's a whore. Yeah.
And Julie says, I'm not going to sign it. Like that's just none of my business.
Yeah.
And so she just doesn't sign it.
Yeah.
And so then soon after that, the other woman comes to her apartment, with flowers and is like, I get to stay because of you. Thank you. And she just lets herself into her apartment and starts looking around, very comfortable. And Julie is obviously a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's kind of strange. But in a way, it's like she's trying to have no attachments, no trappings, and people are just like coming into her apartment. It kind of sounds like a sitcom.
Yeah. No, yeah.
Premise,
I'm just thinking about what you're saying. I like
because
how
from
you
here on
worded
out, that woman, Lucille, like befriends Julie whether or not Julie wants it.
Yeah.
But Julie needs it.
Yeah.
Because there's a time when I can't remember, does Lucille help Julie before Julie helps her? I feel like Julie.
What does Lucille help her with in the movie?
The rats.
That's before, I think.
So
I have it written down, but we are jumping ahead.
I know,
There's
I'm just
actually
skipping. I'm just getting through this part.
Oh, okay.
But Julie has a rat that gave birth to more rats in her apartment.
Yeah.
And she's freaking out. And
this is when Gilmore peeked up. Like, he was on the couch and he looked up because he was hearing that. He's kind of looking up a little bit right now.
By the way, we're pretty sure he doesn't like Christian Bale, and that's not going to fly in the Micah household. We were watching The Pale Blue Eye, and there were a couple scenes where he just would look up and bark at him.
He barked it, and our dog does
kind of a growl bark too.
It was a little weird.
Yeah.
And it was just close-up shots of Christian Bale, and then he just has a worried look on his face sometimes when he looks at the TV, and he had it, and I was like, oh man, he is not a Bale head.
He is not, and that's not okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she has rats in her apartment. She can't deal with it, so she borrows a cat from a neighbor.
Yeah.
To take care of the rats, and then later on, Lucille finds out what happens. Julie can't deal with it, and Lucille offers to clean up the mess.
Yeah.
And then Julie helps Lucille in the middle of the night because Lucille is working at a club. I think it's a strip club.
Okay, yeah.
I'm just getting through this part.
Okay.
But working at a strip club, and she sees...
It's like a peep show. They have sex on stage and stuff.
Oh, that's what's happening.
Because I was a little more shocked than if it was a strip club scene.
Well, it's a European movie, Micah. So Lucille, when she was out there, she saw her father.
Yeah, and she just needed someone to come and say hi, basically.
Talk to her.
Well, we'll probably touch on those things again.
Sure.
But
that's how someone is sucked into her life.
Yeah. There was a pretty wild. Oh crud! I just
crud.
So I found out, I was looking up stuff for the movie. I'm gonna put this lower in my notes, and they had to do. So I guess they couldn't get actual rat sounds.
Okay.
So there's a voice actor who did it.
Really?
And do you want to know who did it?
Who?
Patton Oswalt.
Okay, that's not funny.
Come on.
Yeah, that's funny. You know what's funny about that too, though, on another level?
I wrote that down so that I would remember to do it. That's crazy.
Patton Oswalt has the coolest career because he's a fan of everything, and he gets to be in everything.
Yeah.
So if that was even true, he happened to be a big fan of this director, he'd probably be in this movie.
But not in 1993, though.
And I'm not complaining about that.
No. He's I'm happy that
whenever
he has
you
the
see him in
career
something, you just can feel nothing but joy because he loves whatever this pop culture thing is.
It's not like how Ryan Reynolds has been recently, where he shows up in a movie and you're like, of course he's in this.
No, you see Patton in it, and it's I'm laughing immediately.
But I wrote that down last night
funny.
Because I wanted to make that joke.
Hardy har har.
Please go to Apple or iTunes and give us a 5-star review and tell us how much you liked that. I saw we did finally get another review.
Yeah? So
I think someone just started it.
I did the other day.
It was you?
Oh, I thought I'd done it before.
No, you had to have. Because you can keep starring it, but it only counts one.
Oh, okay.
So I'm sure you've done it. Okay. But someone else did it, and it helps people find the show.
Yeah.
So make sure you star it. We need to get, by the end of this year, we need to get to 4D million listeners. 40 million.
I want to go to Abu Dhabi. I want to meet that tier goal.
Yeah, because we do have on our patreon.com/MicahMcCaw, if we get 10,000 patrons, we're going to record an episode in Abu Dhabi. Now, if we get 75 patrons, we're going to cover every single Studio Ghibli movie on Patreon. If we get 50 patrons, when we get 50 patrons, we're going to cover every Pixar movie that we haven't covered yet. So sign up for Patreon, $3 a month. That is literally less than a cup of coffee a month, because coffee is now like $5 for a cup. And that's okay.
Okay,
But
let's get back to the movie.
so she keeps going to this coffee shop throughout the movie, and she sees this man. Let's talk about the recorder man. She sees this man who's playing a recorder.
That's like, is there any lamer name for an instrument?
I know.
I've always hated that.
Yeah, it's not a good name. But he's
What's
playing
a piccolo?
it. A piccolo is like a higher pitched flute, basically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Do you know that there's something called a piccolo snare, and that's a higher pitched drum snare?
Oh, cool.
They're pretty cool. So she hears this man playing, and it sounds like he's playing her husband's music.
But okay, but not at first.
Yeah.
At some point in the movie later on, when she's in the coffee shop with Olivier.
And we could jump to that.
Because I think the guy is
actually, no, we
playing
can't yet. Yeah.
the music that's not even out yet.
Oh, was that the implication?
Because they kind of have a reaction of like, how could he know that music? Because if the music's just like out,
yeah,
sure, yeah, he'd play it. But
he says like I make up lots of music. When she asks like, how did you hear that?
Yeah, what do you think that means?
Oh, that's interesting.
Because I can't remember what happens directly following that. Like if she learned, gained anything from it.
You know what I think it could mean? He has a mistress that lives in Paris, and he hears that man playing that music, and he has written that music after hearing that man play that music.
I think he was a mistress of someone.
Yeah, he got out of the car. He was homeless, but we see him get out of the car one day, and there's like what looks like a well-off woman in the car. So I think there's a potential about that.
Yeah,
that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Didn't think that through. But one thing, and that would yeah. No, I think that's what happened, because I was going to point out that at the end when she finally decides to work on the music and they're working on it, she says she changes a part to a flute part.
Oh.
And when she did that, I was like,
bingo.
Well, I just thought, she's doing that because of the recorder guy. That's like in her brain. But now I think maybe she's intentionally like
she's giving him a voice. It's the voice to unite all of Europe. He gets a voice. She gets a voice. Olivier gets a voice. We all get voices.
Yeah, well, that's one of it. But like she's accepting the mistress, and she's accepting her husband, and then she's like, well, he got it from this guy, so let's honor that and let's do his vision.
Interesting.
Huh. Even deeper.
Yeah.
Folks, it's even deeper. But then she gets a call from someone, and she meets at this coffee shop, and it's the guy that we saw at the beginning of the movie who
witnessed the car accident.
And he has a necklace, and he said, I've been trying to track you down.
It's a cross.
Yeah, necklace of a cross. I've been trying to track you down and give this to you. And isn't she just like, you can... Well,
okay, well, he's...
Music fades to black.
Yep.
Comes back.
Because she is forced to face the tragedy of her life.
Yeah.
And he says, I felt like I needed to give it back to you because I didn't want to steal it.
Yeah.
Like that would have meant I stole it. And then he's kind of saying like, I can tell you what it was like if you want to know the accident. She doesn't want to know.
Yeah.
And then he says, I did talk to your husband.
Yeah.
Before. And he says your husband said,
now try coughing.
And Julie starts laughing, and I thought this was so sweet.
Yeah.
Her husband was telling a joke right up until the car accident.
Uh-huh.
And she tells the kid the joke, and she's laughing while she's telling it. So it's like this memory brings her joy.
Yeah.
And especially she says she's especially laughing because my husband always repeated the punchline.
Yeah. And so the punchline is, I now try coughing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And then she doesn't want the necklace. It's a part of her letting that go. And she lets him keep the necklace. She doesn't even give him an opportunity to really give it to her. She's just like, it's yours. You can have it.
yeah. Which it's got to feel strange if you're him.
Yes.
Yeah. And then she's at that cafe again. And then Olivier has tracked her down and he expresses that he misses her. And then she's like, oh, I'm going to move again.
But then, he comes to the conclusion of like, okay, loud and clear.
Yeah.
I will let you be, but I'm here. Basically, like he doesn't try to. I don't know. He's not begging her or anything.
Right. And then she visits her mother, who gets confused very easily.
She's in a nursing home.
Yes.
And her mother is watching bungee jumping videos or stuff on TV.
Yeah.
So that's when we see that again.
Yeah.
This time people are definitely tethered to ropes.
Yeah.
There's one in particular where a very old man bungee jumps, and it was shocking.
It was.
And then someone was bungee jumping from a helicopter, which I don't even get that.
Yeah.
And they both
You know what I thought about when someone bungee jumped? And I know that they have precautions to make sure this happens, but what if
snap?
No, what if it wrapped around your neck when you were bungee jumping?
Oh. I think that's like that wouldn't happen.
I think it could happen if you did it wrong.
I think it could if whoever is organizing it is an imbecile.
Yeah. But like if I was like, "Oh, I'm just going to buy a bungee jump and jump."
Well, yeah,
off
you might accidentally hang yourself.
But could you imagine that?
No.
You'd probably rip your body in half.
Potentially.
Rip your head off of your body. Anyway, you were saying something before I cut you off for that stupid tangent.
Both, her and her mom, she's trying to talk to her mom and her mom can barely remember her. And
yeah,
they both kind of end up watching the TV and just watching people falling, but they're connected to something, so they're not going to go away.
And one thing that I loved is when she originally spoke with the real estate agent, he said, "What do you do for a living?" And she says, "Nothing." And he goes, "No, but what?" And she says, I do nothing. Because that's what she wants her life to become. And then her mother says to her, I don't have anything anymore, yada, yada, yada. All I have to do is nothing. So I think she's seeing like a different version of herself, I guess, at that point with her mother. Thought that was worth pointing out.
Mm-hmm.
Then she borrows the cat. And then, yes, pretty quickly after that, Lucille calls for help, and Julie goes to a crazy sex club to help, is what I wrote.
So she helps Lucille, but then she also sees this news thing going on, like in an office. And it's that journalist is interviewing Olivier, who is going to try and finish Patrice's magnum opus. He's going to try.
Yeah.
And then they flash some images across the screen, like pictures of Julie with her family, but then also the picture of Patrice and his mistress.
Yeah.
Which is like, huh? It's one of those it's one of those pieces.
Puff pieces, you were gonna say.
I was gonna say puff piece. But it shocks her, not only the picture, but what Olivier said he was gonna do, that she tracks him down.
And what did he say he was gonna do?
What?
He said he was going to finish
attempt
the piece.
I said that already.
Oh, you did? Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
So she tracks him down, and basically he freely admits, I said that, I put that out there because I knew you were going to see it. I was hoping you were going to see it.
Yeah.
And come and find me. And you did.
When she says, you have no right to do this. And he says, it was the only way to make you want or not want, to care or not to care. He says something like that where he's not even necessarily needing her. He knows she is in limbo, and he's not necessarily needing her to agree to work on the piece and work on it. He just needs her to make a decision and make a step in her life, because he knows her well enough to know she's in limbo and not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
Which, again, that's like a much more nuanced conversation about grief than just get over it.
Well, that's the interesting thing too about freedom. He's saying, like, as if like you have too much freedom. You need to I don't know if he's actually saying you need to do something. He just needs he's trying to prompt her into making a decision
Yeah.
because she's trying to go through a life of no decision.
Yeah.
So she's asking about the mistress, finds out that she is interning to be a lawyer.
Uh-huh.
So she goes to the courthouse, found out that lawyers in France wear funny robes.
Over by Montparnasse.
Okay. Yeah. And she finds her, follows her to a brasserie. Follows her into
what does brasserie mean again?
It's like a pub.
Pub, okay.
That's where we had most of our meals.
Yes.
In France. And follows her into the bathroom. And immediately the mistress recognizes her, of course. And we, as the viewer, immediately recognize that this woman's pregnant. And we go, oh, crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Julie asks if it's his. She says it is. He died before he could find out that I was even pregnant.
Yikes.
Just a lot of complicated things on many levels in general. And then the mistress is like saying, like, do you hate me?
Yeah.
Do you hate Patrice? Like, basically, it's kind of always the interesting thing where it's like, are you going to hate me now? And it's like, probably, right?
Yeah.
But Julie doesn't answer.
Well, and then she says, do you want to know if he loved me? Is
That's
that why you're doing this? And then she looks at the necklace that she's
wearing a gold cross.
And she says, I already know that he did. Which is sad.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Really sad.
So and she leaves her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then does she start working on the...
And then she starts working on the song. So she's putting the life back together.
Throughout the movie, she is we see her swimming in a very huge pool, and this is always lit very blue.
Uh-huh.
Is that her swimming in her grief? Is that her swimming through her grief?
I didn't really think about it either direction.
So I feel like she often goes swimming after a big thing happens.
Yeah.
Like she needs to exercise to work off the pent up everything.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if she's trying to like outswim it, outrun it, but she's just bathed in it. And then
I like that.
At one point too, in one of those scenes, while she's swimming, a group of girls, young girls, all jump into the pool because they have swim class.
Uh-huh.
Which is like, well, that's gotta hurt. Because all those girls seem around the age of her daughter.
Yeah.
So it's just she's like she's here to like, only do one thing, and it's like exercise, and then she's just reminded.
Yeah.
She can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
She gets no respect.
Yeah, hey, nobody's gonna top my Ratatouille joke, so don't even try, Jordan. So then they begin composing the song, her and Olivier, and there's my second favorite shot of the movie. As she's putting her life back together and things are coming back into play, they're composing the song. They're starting to become a resolution. The camera slowly goes out of focus.
I loved it too. I loved it so much.
And I actually thought that was going to be the last shot of the movie. It felt like this is the end. Like she's gone through this phase and she's going to live on. But it's not because
what's the importance of making it out of focus?
I think it's I think it's kind of like, one, it works on an ironic level where yes, she's moving forward, things are becoming clear for her again, and it's going out of focus.
It's not, because she's going in a direction she was trying so hard to avoid.
Sure.
Because it all looks so hazy to her. But if she only goes one way, which is nothing, she can at least just like see the apartment that she lives in and dwells in and sits in.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I think we could spend a lot of time on that shot, just piecing it together and figuring it out. Because, maybe there's also something like, because when I thought it was going to end there, I thought maybe this is like, we're not allowed to be a part of the story anymore. Like it's over. You saw what you needed to see. But there still is a little bit of the movie left, so maybe that's not one of the things. But then she gives her house to the mistress to raise the child in.
Mm-hmm. The giant castle house.
Yeah, and the mistress says, he told me a lot about you, and she was like, oh, okay. And then she says, he said you were good, and you are.
You were good and you were generous. And
Yeah.
that's always what you tried to be.
Yeah.
You were always trying to be good and generous.
Yeah.
Very sweet.
Very sweet. And then she doesn't want. There's something where she's like Olivier calls her, and she says, "I finished it," and he
No,
goes.
she calls him.
She calls him.
She finishes the piece
Yeah.
at home and calls him and says, "I finished it." And then she says, "Do you still love me?"
Yeah.
And he says, "I've never stopped loving you." And then she said, "Okay, come over." And then she said, like, "If you're not tired, come over." And he's like, "I'm not tired, but I'm not coming over."
Yeah.
And she's asks him why. And basically this is just another moment of him saying, like, I'm not going to finish this piece with you if we're not going to like with the way that it is, like the way that the world sees it. Does that make sense?
Well, it sounded to me almost like an artistic thing where he was like, "I want to finish it. It has to be mine."
Yeah. But it doesn't just mean his, because I think he also means it's either mine or it's yours.
Yeah, that's what he says. That's what he says.
He's giving her the choice, because it sounds like throughout her husband's career, we don't know if she had a choice.
Yeah.
It might have been.
Oh, interesting.
You know,
like he's saying, I know the relationship with your husband, and he took a lot of the credit. You were the real genius. So now it's your turn to say, "This is mine. So finish it."
So is it yours or is it mine?
Yeah.
Basically. And then she says,
"Dang, that hits it way harder."
And then she says, "I'm coming over," which I think is her making her choice.
Yeah.
And she brings the music with her.
Yeah.
And
finishes the score. And
Yep.
we have the music playing with the children singing Corinthians 13, is that what you said? And then there's a montage of all the characters. I know ultrasounds are blue, but it is just interesting that the baby is bathed in the ultrasound blue. Aren't they?
Ultrasounds are white.
Or yeah, I guess they're white, but it was blue in the movie.
Well, first of all, it pans to the guy who witnessed the car crash. He wakes up in the middle of the night and he's all lit blue and he's like holding the necklace.
Yeah.
He's still attached to this thing. And then it goes to the ultrasound.
Yeah. Which is blue, baby blue.
And then it goes to Olivier's place.
Yeah, and then we also see Lucille, and we see most of the characters from the movie.
And her mom.
Yeah. And she's bathed in red. But yeah, the Lucille, not the mom. And then I said last blue was found.
Okay, so the last moment of blue. Okay, so she goes to Olivier's and they spend the night together.
Okay.
And I think she's made a decision. She's happy.
Yeah.
I think. And she wakes up the next morning. I think it's the next morning. And she's looking outside. I think it's the morning because the hue of blue looks like dawn.
Oh, that's
like
right. Dawn. It
so
corrected dawn to found.
Okay.
FOWN.
Because blue, as we know, usually associated with sad, depressed.
Yeah.
Even calm. And this blue was it truly was like a happier shade of blue. An acceptance.
Yeah. And it just feels like, okay, she's gonna be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the movie, right?
Yeah.
Good?
The movie rocked.
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah, I guess just to say, keep listening. Share it with a friend. And be with us next week. I believe.
Wait, and these movies are on HBO.
They are on HBO,
we've covered some international movies that we've had to rent throughout. These are all 3 on HBO. Type in 3 colors and they'll pop up. It's blue, white, and then red.
Yes, it is. I was double checking that it's because white and red came out in the same year.
Oh.
Wow, they came out within less than a month of each other. Less like a week. January 26th and February 8th. Okay. But yeah, white is next week. And then on our Patreon, we would have done our Oscar special this month. So, I mean, howdy doody. That sounds fun, don't it? Thanks for listening.
Au revoir.
Ah.